Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli, back with another review video. And yes, you read the title, you know exactly what it is that I'm reviewing, and as I teased in the last review video, yes, this one DreamWorks animated feature film that has to do with, historical stuff, and, this being about a boy and a dog time traveling, kind of screwing things up in the space-time continuum and almost, about to cause a paradox. That's right, guys. I am reviewing from 2014, and seeing as how it's celebrating its anniversary, DreamWorks' Mr. Peabody and Sherman. Yes, Mr. Peabody and Sherman, based off of the Jay Ward cartoon, and it was a segment, part of the Rocky and Bullwinkle show, that, and Dudley Do-Right as well, and I believe that this was the fourth movie adaptation of something of Jay Ward cartoons. The first three, the fifth, Mr. Peabody and Sherman being the fifth movie adaptation of something of a Jay Ward cartoon, The first four, being George of the Jungle, Dudley Do-Right, The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle, and George of the Jungle 2. And after the first four, then would come Mr. Peabody and Sherman, that DreamWorks would do. And also, it was one of those DreamWorks animated feature films to be distributed by 20th Century Fox, because, at the time, DreamWorks, they went from Paramount to 20th Century Fox, then to Universal Pictures. So Mr. Peabody and Sherman being one of those DreamWorks animated films to be distributed by 20th Century Fox. And I gotta say, I quite enjoyed Mr. Peabody and Sherman. I hate to say it, but it's true. Mr. Peabody and Sherman was one of those movies I never got around to until now. You heard me right there, guys. It took me that long to get to this movie. Well, it happens. It happens to some people. Like I said, movies that you never get around to until now, etc. You get my point. And a couple of fun facts that I'd like to share before I, read the description / the story. Rob Minkoff, I'm pretty sure because I got his name right. Yeah, Rob Minkoff, who is best known for directing a animation masterpiece from Disney, The Lion King. He's the director of this, and I read that this was a dream of his to direct a animated, movie adaptation, whatever, of Mr. Peabody and Sherman, because Mr. Peabody and Sherman was one of his favorites on the Rocky and Bullwinkle show, and, I don't see why not, because, for him directing this and how, he's one of those, guys who, being a part of Disney would do something DreamWorks, a good example, Chris Sanders, you get what I'm saying? So, yeah. So good for Rob Minkoff to direct this. Also, Rob Minkoff, he would also direct the first movie adaptation of The Haunted Mansion, and he would also direct, Paws and Fury, The Blazing Saddles remake. Yeah, that one. I'm sure for poor Rob Minkoff, for him directing that animated film, I'm sure, because, he did his very best directing it. I don't blame him, so, that goes for him and Mel Brooks, both of them doing that movie. Not to mention, coincidentally, Mel Brooks being in Mr. Peabody and Sherman, but until I get to which character he's voicing, a historical figure, I should say, in this movie. Yeah, because, a lot of historical figures that appear in this movie, but until I talk about them and when I get to them, yeah. So another thing about Mr. Peabody and Sherman, I don't know, because, I think, it did a very good job for what it had to offer, for this being a, movie adaptation of a Jay Ward cartoon. It's a shame because, all of the movie adaptations of Jay Ward's cartoons, not the best. I like the only one that turned out pretty decent, aside from Mr. Peabody and Sherman, would have to be the first George of the Jungle film, because I think, yeah, everybody, really loves, and so do I, really enjoys the first George of the Jungle film, good old Brendan Fraser. So, and by the way, because coincidentally, a cast member from the first George of the Jungle film happens to be in Mr. Peabody and Sherman, but until I get to her. Also, I didn't realize that Danny Elfman, he did the music and score for Mr. Peabody and Sherman. I think I did have that moment where, that the music, it sounds familiar, because you would sometimes recognize how the music in movies is scored by a certain composer, like, say, John Williams, and Danny Elfman, so, yeah. And, Danny Elfman, he is best known for, being the main composer for most of the movies that Tim Burton has done. But other films that he's done, I'm sure some people would not realize that he's done, would be like, say, this, Mr. Peabody and Sherman, Meet the Robinsons, Dick Tracy, Hellboy, The Golden Army, I'm just saying. But enough said. As always, read the description / the story. Mr. Peabody, the most accomplished canine, if I'm even saying that one word right, in the world, and his boy, Sherman, use a time machine called the Way Back to embark on outrageous adventures. However, when Sherman takes the Way Back without permission to impress his friend Penny, or, they don't start off being friends at first, he accidentally rips a hole in the universe and causes havoc in the world history. It's up to Mr. Peabody to mount a rescue and prevent the past, present, and future from being permanently altered. Okay, so before I get into the movie, one more thing, because as you saw in the thumbnail, because, yeah, I have my Blu-ray copy, it was really cool because when I put the disc in, it started off showing like a little montage, celebrating 20 years of DreamWorks animation. And, yeah, it was really cool, like, seeing some of their past films, like Ants, some of their hand-drawn animated films, like, most notably, The Road to El Dorado, even, the Artman films. Yeah, because they count being, DreamWorks animated films. And, I was kind of getting a little vibe of, some of those Disney DVDs, like in the mid-2000s, where it would start off with, like, say, Jack Sparrow, Peter Pan, and, From the Magic Within Our Hearts, that. I was kind of getting a little vibe of that. I know that what was in the opening to the Mr. Peabody and Sherman Blu-ray and DVD was not a ripoff and such. It was just, a montage of, celebrating 20 years, and yeah, but I'm just saying, because, and, all those clips, put together, and just, like, what happens with the Disney DVDs, that opening, and with the castle, if you get what I'm saying. And in this case, because with, the DreamWorks logo, the fishing boy. So, yeah. So I thought I'd mention that, and if any of you, have a copy of Mr. Peabody and Sherman as well, and with that opening. Not to mention, because they even showing a trailer for Rio 2, something that's not DreamWorks, but in this case, Blue Sky. Well, because, at the time, DreamWorks, their animated films being distributed by 20th Century Fox, Blue Sky Animation Studios being a part of 20th Century Fox, so they already had another animation studio, so you get my point. Okay, but, yes, so with the film itself, and speaking of, the DreamWorks logo, because, the way it opens, because it's really nice, because we see Sherman on the moon and, fishing, and we, of course, get the introduction of our two main characters, and I think, yeah, from the beginning to end of this movie, Mr. Peabody doing a bit of narration and kind of breaking the fourth wall. I mean, sometimes when characters narrate, they would look directly at us, the audience, that whole thing. Mr. Peabody being voiced by Ty Burrell, and good for Ty Burrell because this movie that he did came out the same month as him doing a Muppets film, which being Muppets Most Wanted, both of them celebrating their anniversaries. So yeah, good for Ty. And Ty Burrell, he's done some other voice work for other animated films. We have Sherman, and I didn't quite realize this, and obviously this is in the cartoon. Sherman is Mr. Peabody's adoptive son. Okay, and I was wondering, at first, like, would Sherman call Mr. Peabody his dad? But no, Mr. Peabody told Sherman to just call him Mr. Peabody, or Peabody. Yeah, understandable. And Sherman being voiced by Max Charles, and Max Charles would be best known for playing, like, say, young Peter Parker in the 2 Amazing Spider-Man films with Andrew Garfield, and most notably, on the side of voice work, being the voice of Kion in The Lion Guard. Yep, that's him. So it's cool, because he went from voicing Sherman to The Lion Guard. Yeah, so Sherman and Mr. Peabody, because I think because they live in New York City. Yeah, New York City, present time, obviously. And, and just like in the show, because I can tell that, with every episode of Mr. Peabody and Sherman, because time traveling and Sherman learning about history and actually experiencing history. So it's nice to see. Because they travel in France in the French Revolution. Yeah, so they travel there, and Marie Antoinette's time, if I'm even saying that right, if I'm saying her last name right. You know me sometimes, bear with me. Marie Antoinette, she was voiced by Laurie Fraser, I think I'm saying that right. Because the whole thing of her eating cake and the poor people outside, and thus the French Revolution begins, because, they tried to take her and her, the others held hostage, and, of course, disaster strikes, and, Mr. Peabody and Sherman avoiding the bad guys and such, and trying to get out of there, even when, like, say, Mr. Peabody is, trying to escape from almost getting his head decapitated, because, that kind of execution, that silver contraption to slice your head. Yeah, that whole thing. And you see, because, it's obvious that Mr. Peabody would not get decapitated and, executed. And, he cleverly got out of there, and by using, like, I think guacamole as bait, taking Mr. Peabody's place. And one of the bad guys, and in the French Revolution, Robespierre, if I'm saying the name right, being voiced by Guillermo Artios, if I'm saying the full name right too. Again, bear with me. And of course, yeah, coming face to face with him, and a little sword fight, and of course, they make their way out of there by causing a flood, but also, like, lighting the fuse, I think, and yeah, and they get out of there. And of course, they time travel back to their time, and, all that Sherman learned about the French Revolution, and so on. And, their next adventure, that goes for Sherman on his, going on an adventure on his own at school. So we see Mr. Peabody taking Sherman on his first day to school, and already because, we get the introduction of one student who's kind of giving Sherman a hard time at first. She's bullying Sherman, and that being Penny Peterson, being voiced by fellow Modern Family co-star Ariel Winter, because, as you all know, and you should know, because Ty Burrell being one of the main stars of Modern Family, and that also goes for Ariel Winter. Also, Ariel Winter being best known on the side of voice work, being the voice of one of the Girl Scout troops, led by Isabella, Gretchen, and she's also the voice of Sophia the First. Yep, so hey, and nice to see, because both Sherman and Penny being voiced by two, kid actors who would voice two well-known characters on Disney Junior, So at first, Penny is, giving Sherman a hard time, bullying him, and, because she knows about Sherman's adoptive father, which being a dog, and just taunting him and just embarrassing him, like, calling him a dog and having him to go get and to fetch his sandwich because she threw it, and just telling him to go fetch. Golly, Penny. And here's the thing, because before watching this movie, I had a feeling, and yeah, it was obvious that, both Sherman and Penny, they would become a couple, which, yes, of course they do later on, but I had no idea, because what Penny would be like to him at first, oh my gosh. Imagine both of them, especially her, looking back at what she was like when she and Sherman first met. And what happens next is, because Mr. Peabody was called into the principal's office. Principal Purdy, I think I'm saying that right, being voiced by Stephen Tobolowsky, I'm probably might be closely saying his last name right. So Mr. Peabody is called into the principal's office because of what happened, but Sherman bit Penny. Yeah, bit her like a dog, basically. And, Mr. Peabody, is assuring the principal, and I think, Mr. Peabody, he's surprised by this. However, someone steps into the principal's office, and that being, she is the main antagonist, even though there's really not that much of her in this film. Mrs. Grunion, if I'm saying her name right, being voiced by Allison Janney. And if I'm correct, this being Allison Janney's second DreamWorks animated feature film where she plays a female antagonist, not to mention them wearing business suits and so on, because she was the mayor of this neighborhood in Over the Hedge. Yeah, so, fitting, I guess, for Allison Janney. So, and you know what? She's good at playing evil. I mean, for voice acting, but especially, playing the role of Tanya's mother in I, Tanya. Yeah, so, so she steps in and basically warns Mr. Peabody that if anything goes wrong, because she'll be showing up tomorrow night at Mr. Peabody's house to investigate and to see if Mr. Peabody is, suitable to, be raising his adoptive son, Sherman. If not, then Sherman is being taken away from Mr. Peabody out of his custody. And Mr. Peabody, of course, he's not gonna let her get to him and such, and he assures her that everything will go well. I even like how, because she fogged up his glasses, Mr. Peabody confronting his adoptive son about that. And what happens next is, the next day and that evening, because Mr. Peabody basically is fixing dinner, and Sherman doesn't know this at first until they show up. Mr. Peabody invited Penny's family, the Petersons. Yeah, the Petersons. Of course, Penny being there. And Penny's parents, Patty Peterson, being voiced by Leslie Main. And like I said, because Leslie Main, because she was in George of the Jungle, and she's in this. And this being her second movie adaptation of a Warren J. cartoon that she's in, and her doing voice acting in this. Yeah. And also Paul Peterson. And I could have sworn that I was recognizing that voice. Who is that? He sounds familiar. And sure enough, because when I looked it up, the voice of Paul Peterson, Penny's dad, none other than Stephen Colbert. Hey, Stephen Colbert, he's a funny guy, and you know what? He's good at doing voice acting and, being in animated films. He's got a good voice for that, and he's good at being funny in animated films. And I think, this is Stephen Colbert's second DreamWorks animated feature film, because the first one he did was voicing the president in Monsters vs. Aliens. He was so good in that. And, he doesn't disappoint in this. Because Paul Peterson has a couple of funny moments. And at first, Paul is really doubting on Mr. Peabody. And there's a moment where, Mr. Peabody is, playing music on a piano, entertaining them. And while Mr. Peabody had Penny and Sherman talk things out and such, Mr. Peabody was playing piano music for the Petersons. Mrs. Peterson was enjoying it, but Mr. Peterson, Paul, not so much, and he wanted to hear something different, like, say, jazz. And because Mr. Peabody plays a different instrument, actually, no, rock and roll, my mistake. I think jazz was probably in there somewhere, but I don't know. From playing a guitar, a didgeridoo, a xylophone, Paul naming out a lot of instruments that, could you play this, that, and that, and we just see him just immediately playing that instrument and so on. Well, Mr. Peabody, I think it's obvious that, and for it kind of being established in this movie, he's an expert at a lot. Even yodeling. Paul asked him if he could do yodeling, and he did so. Oh my gosh. Also Mr. Peabody, he's a good dancer, because even there was a little montage of Mr. Peabody, what he's good at, dancing and such. And can't forget to mention this because after that little conversation that Mr. Peabody and Sherman had after what happened at school and Mr. Peabody being called into the principal's office, there's a little moment where Mr. Peabody is looking at past photos, and we get a little montage of the life of Mr. Peabody and Sherman. And you know something? Because with Mr. Peabody's backstory, he never had a home, because every time he was rejected at the dog orphanage, because he was not like any other normal dog. But what's wrong with that? Nothing at all. Eventually, because, Mr. Peabody, he did graduate, and then, at one point, he found, a baby, which being Sherman. Sherman was sadly abandoned. He was in a box on the side of the road and in an alleyway, and it was raining. Oh my gosh, is that not emotional or what? And we even see, because Mr. Peabody going to the court and to the judge, that, he can be a good adoptive father to Sherman. And the judge was voiced by, he has to be here somewhere. Let me see, because, in the All-State guy, are you in good hands? Yeah, that being Dennis Hasbert. I think I'm saying his last name right. So he's the voice of the judge. I just thought of this. Wouldn't it have been funny if I'm just saying, if the judge said something like a little nod to, Dennis being in the All-State commercials, something like, are you in good hands, Mr. Peabody? If you get where I'm going with this, that would have been funny, and if they wanted to do that, but unless they had to get permission from the Allstate company and so on, but, it would have been funny, don't you think? I'm just saying, because I just, I thought of that, and I thought I'd share that with you. Alright, so, anyways, back to where we were, because in Mr. Peabody and Sherman's house, because Mr. Peabody, again, doing the best he can to, entertain and keep them company, the Petersons, even when, Paul, he's still not sure, and, he's just about had it with Mr. Peabody. And at one point, Paul accidentally, broke his back. But sure enough, Mr. Peabody, he helps Paul out with that because he's an expert at this. And if he's not an expert at so much, as I said. So he helps with Paul's back, just moving him and such, seems painful, but, it's the only way. And sure enough, Paul, he's a lot better now. And I think, yeah, he's come to appreciate Mr. Peabody more. And coming to Sherman and Penny, things are not going so well at first, even, Penny, because the whole reason, because with how this all began, and with her just picking on Sherman and giving him a hard time, because at school, in class, the teacher asked the students questions on, like, say, George Washington and what tree did he cut down. And for Sherman, he knows the answers to all that with George Washington. And for Penny, she thought that George Washington cut down a cherry tree. But no, it was an apple tree. So, come on, Penny, you should have known that. Did your parents ever taught you about that? On, the first president of the United States? I'm just saying. And she just questioned Sherman, how do you know this? Did you read it in a book? Did your adoptive dad told you? And, like, how do you know? And Sherman, because, well, Penny was getting to Sherman. And sure enough, Sherman got... He let it out. George Washington told me. And yeah, Penny was getting to him, and, he spit it out accidentally. And then this leads to, well, Sherman showing Penny the time machine, the way back. And even though Mr. Peabody told Sherman to not reveal the time machine to Penny, etc., but of course he did. Again, Penny got to him. So, yeah. You have those situations, just, and I think, yeah, it's been in some movies, yeah. So, of course, Sherman shows Penny the secret room and with the way back time machine. And, of course, they do a bit of time traveling, even Penny still getting to Sherman and convincing him to do so. And thus they time travel, and, well, where are they time traveling? Not where, when, as Mr. Peabody establishes, and even Sherman later on. Well, we don't see where they time travel, but what happens next is, well, Mr. Peabody is still keeping them, comfortable, Penny's parents, and I think, yeah, he was fixing a couple of smoothies, and while, like, the music from Terry Gilliam's Brazil was playing, the Office work music, and that was played in the teaser for Wall-E, dun 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 dun, that's a good piece of music right there, very catchy, you just want to dance to it. I kind of did when watching the movie, Mr. Peabody and Sherman, that is. So Sherman, we see Sherman, he's back, and he's getting Mr. Peabody to come over, and, well, Sherman tells Mr. Peabody what happened and where the heck is Penny. Sherman's the only one that's there. Where's Penny? Well, again, Sherman told Mr. Peabody, and, yeah, by showing her the way back time machine, and thus, well, they have to go get her. Where they ended up was ancient Egypt. Yep, and that's not a good sign, especially what happens when they get there. When they show up at ancient Egypt, well, they see... well, Penny, she seems to be all right, especially since now she has a boyfriend, that being King freaking Tut. Yeah, King Tut is Penny's boyfriend at first, and King Tut being voiced by Zach Gallison, I think, yeah, that sounds about right, Zach Gallison. And what happens next is, and, well, unbeknownst to Penny, because, this coming out of nowhere for Penny, of course, well, they are due to be married. And then we see Mr. Peabody and Sherman, they are disposed of, a hatch opens, and they end up underground, and thus they have to avoid booby traps. And, yeah, I mean... And especially, like, the way to, avoid the booby traps, especially those, the bricks, and there's, like, symbols, ancient Egypt handwriting on the ground, and Mr. Peabody figuring out the math and such on which steps to step on, and he successfully does so. And it's now Sherman's turn to do the exact same thing that Mr. Peabody does. And it seemed like, yeah, Sherman successfully did so, but of course he did step on the wrong one, and thus all hell breaks loose. The booby traps are going off and such. The ground is breaking and such, and, them getting on a boat, like one boat that will escape, through the light while the other one is just gonna be destroyed. And of course they successfully get on the boat. And it's funny how they get out of the, through the light, through the Great Sphinx, like, butthole. Talk about adult jokes and stuff like that in DreamWorks animated films. Again, DreamWorks being no Disney, that's the thing. And so after that, well, because they make their way, the wedding is about to happen, and apparently, because obviously, in ancient Egypt time, because it was a part of the wedding ceremony, like, a drop of blood or something, from a sword. And right before that's about to happen, Mr. Peabody and Sherman, fool/trick the ancient Egypt people that, because Mr. Peabody pretending to be a stoned god and commanding that the wedding is called off and so on. It seems to be working out at first, but up until, because Sherman is in charge of, like, making the flames and fire and smoke, the fire gets out of hand and, burning Sherman's feet, and, once again, all hell breaks loose, and, of course, they successfully escape Mr. Peabody, Sherman, and Penny back into the Wayback Time Machine. They escape, of course, but unfortunately, they don't have enough fuel and power, I should say, to get back to their time. So where they end up for right now is Florence, Italy, Leonardo da Vinci's home. Yep. The time with Leonardo da Vinci's time, but also Mona Lisa, because Leonardo da Vinci painting Mona Lisa. We see the Leonardo da Vinci and the Mona Lisa, the woman that was painted for the portrait. And at first, because Leonardo da Vinci is having quite a struggle to get Mona Lisa to smile. But, of course, when Mr. Peabody, Sherman, and Penny show up, Mr. Peabody helps out trying to help get her to smile. Mona Lisa. The name almost slipped out of my head for some reason. Anyways. And the voices of Leonardo da Vinci and the Mona Lisa, or, just Mona Lisa, Leonardo being voiced by good old Stanley Tucci. Yeah, Stanley Tucci is the voice of Leonardo. I didn't realize that. And Mona Lisa being voiced by Lake Bell. Yeah, I know Lake Bell. As of now, she's best known for being the voice of Poison Ivy. Yeah, so her voicing Mona Lisa, pretty funny and cool. And the same goes for good old Stanley Tucci, voicing freaking Leonardo. So yeah, Mr. Peabody, he succeeds on helping Mona Lisa laugh, but, by there being an accident, Mr. Peabody accidentally smashed his face into another painting, and that got Mona Lisa laughing, and, a perfect smile that Leonardo was wanting, and for, to paint, Mona Lisa. And afterwards, because Leonardo helps out Mr. Peabody, Sherman, and Penny, give the Wayback Time Machine more power with this, like, huge contraption that Leonardo has. And while that's, with that going on, Penny asks Sherman to tag along with her to do a little bit of an adventure, even though, because Mr. Peabody, he wants his adoptive son to help out on this, but Leonardo, he assures Mr. Peabody that, we don't need the boys' help, so, they got this. And thus, they go inside one of the buildings of Leonardo, and, up top the attic, they see and discover a flying contraption that Leonardo made. And obviously, because the Leonardo da Vinci, made a flying contraption that, I guess it seemed like it didn't work, but probably so did. The Wright brothers, they successfully made something fly, and thus they invented the airplane. So, anyways, so even though Sherman is against this, like, you know, wanting to do this with Penny, Penny once again convincing Sherman to do so, and thus they attempt to fly it, and, you know, they successfully do so. And also because Mr. Peabody is not ready for Sherman to fly, especially, you know, the way back time machine. And there's a little chat that goes on with Mr. Peabody and Leonardo about, you know, kids and such. Even Leonardo mentioning that he tried to build a child of his own, and which is, like, roaming around and, you know, Papa, Mama, and kind of freaking out the civilians, even Leonardo himself, because, yeah, until I get to that. So, of course, they do see them flying, and Mr. Peabody, you know, what are you doing? You can't fly yet, and such. And, even before Mr. Peabody said that to Sherman, Sherman seemed like to have, that he was able to manage flying it. But after what Mr. Peabody says, that's when he starts to lose control and such. And, well, they do crash. However, for Leonardo, he is happy and proud of Sherman because Sherman becoming the first person to fly. Mr. Peabody, not really happy and such about that. So then, and to speed things up, they successfully give the Wayback Time Machine more power, and thus they can continue on back to their rightful time. And with the child that Leonardo built, it comes up to him, and he runs away from it. So, it is creepy. It is creepy looking. So, and as they make their way back, well, because things get out of hand, and Sherman did not know this until Penny spilled the beans. Sherman did not know about, well, you know, Allison Jennings' character telling Mr. Peabody that if anything goes wrong, he'll lose custody of Sherman. Mr. Peabody did not tell Sherman until Penny spilled the beans, and Sherman, he just goes off on his adoptive father and such, and, you know, some hurtful stuff that comes along, like, you know, I am not a dog, and then Mr. Peabody saying back to him, you know, you're a bad dog and always will be a bad dog, however they say it, you know. And to make things worse, because, yeah, the Wayback Time Machine starts to lose control, not to mention it's nearly about to make its way to a black hole. But they, of course, managed to, you know, survive and avoiding the black hole. And where they end up next, well, that being Greece. And they're there during the Turan War, if I'm saying that one word right. Again, you know me sometimes. And, yeah, Mr. Peabody and Penny are okay, but where's Sherman? Where did he go? Well, did something happen? Did he accidentally fly out of the way back? Or just what happened? Well, actually, they do see that, well, Sherman ran away, because we see footprints on the beach that they're on. And we then see another historical figure in Greece, that being Agamemnon, if I'm saying, I think I'm about close, but yeah. And him being voiced by the one and only good old Patrick Warburton. Yeah, Patrick Warburton, he is so good at doing voice acting, and, you know, he of course was funny in this, who he was portraying. And by the way, because Mr. Peabody and Sherman being Patrick Warburton's second DreamWorks animated feature film. The first one he did was, well, can't forget, B-Movie. Yeah, because his voice role in the B-Movie, you know, I don't like honey! I just had to quote that, because Patrick Warburton, like, him playing such a highly, like, anxiety guy, you know? I mean, the character that he played in the B-Movie, I don't know, because I don't see him really being a villain, just, you know, yes, I mean, he tried to murder Barry, but I'm just saying, you know, he doesn't really do anything evil or anything like that, you know, basically because, you know, his character in the B-Movie is just a jerk, that's all. Anyways, so Patrick Warburton, him portraying Agamemnon, however the heck you know me sometimes, and that goes for some others that join me, having trouble pronouncing words. That also goes for my dad. So who Patrick Warburton portrays, well, again, really good and funny. And, well, because the war's about to begin, they're in that, giant horse, that they built, if you know about that. And apparently, Sherman joined them. And, of course, Mr. Peabody and Sherman showing up, they were in this, little small horse that was a present to them, and they pop out of there, and they are to retrieve Sherman. But Sherman, he's refusing, and especially because of what he just found out from both Penny and Mr. Peabody, and thus he's joining the army. And then what happens next is, well, the war begins, and Sherman joining in, and Mr. Peabody warning him that, it's going to be dangerous. He could get killed. And, well, Sherman almost gets killed when he's trying to, be tough and intimidate, who they're fighting against. And, of course, well, because what happens next is, well, of course, Sherman, he runs away when he was trying to be tough and such. Mr. Peabody helps out, because here's another thing that I can't forget to mention. I almost did. Before Sherman went, into school, on his first day of school, Mr. Peabody gave Sherman a dog whistle. It's very quiet, but to dogs, they can hear it very well. And when Sherman uses it, well, of course, Mr. Peabody shows up and, using the sword, saving Sherman. And, well, unfortunately, and out of nowhere, the giant horse that Penny was still in, it started to roll away. And then Mr. Peabody and Sherman, they get on a horse, trying to catch up to it and to get Penny out of there. And they were this close to going over a cliff. But Mr. Peabody, thinking very smartly and analyzing on what to do and to stop the giant, wheeled horse, he stops it and seems like everything's okay. And not to mention it was just that close, almost at the tip of the cliff, So, as they're about to get out of there, Penny, of course something has to happen, in some animated films. Penny's dress that she was wearing, and to go with, Grease, both her and Mr. Peabody, her dress gets caught on a nail, and because of the balance and Sherman going back, to help Penny get unstuck, well, the giant wheeled horse does go down, and, well, Sherman and Penny get out of there, but not Mr. Peabody. And you think at first, and yeah, that goes for Sherman and Penny, you think that Mr. Peabody was killed when that went down over the cliff. And what happens next is Sherman has an idea to save Mr. Peabody and prevent him from being killed, and it seems like a bad idea, and, well, technically it is, but to Sherman, it's the only way to save Mr. Peabody from him getting killed. So yeah, they do travel back to, their time, and they travel right where, well, because Mr. Peabody is serving the smoothies to the Petersons. This time, Sherman and Penny showing up, calling Mr. Peabody to, come over. And, of course, he can clearly see that they're dressed in, the time of Grease and such. And, well, Sherman and Penny, they tell Mr. Peabody what the heck happened. And, well, because this could cause a paradox if there's two of them, like two Shermans and two Pennies, even though it's mostly centered on Sherman. And sure enough, Sherman does show up from, the elevator, Sherman before, traveling, from Leonardo da Vinci's time, you get what I'm saying. And thus, two Shermans are right there. And, well, what happens next? Penny's parents showing up, they come over, and, the other Sherman in his regular clothes, he's hiding, avoiding being seen by Penny's parents, while, Sherman in the Grease outfit is, of course, there, and Penny too, so they're okay. Up until, Allison Jennings' character shows up, Mrs. Grunani, if I'm saying her name right. She shows up and, obviously to investigate. And of course, things do not go so well even when the other Sherman is discovered, and how, Mr. Peabody is trying to tell Allison Jennings' character about, the time being screwed up and such, but, she doesn't care, and she can see that things are not going so well, and thus, going to take both Shermans with her, and then, out of nowhere, I kind of didn't see this coming, but, something like this was bound to happen. Mr. Peabody, because you can, and a close-up of his eyes, dog rage. You can see the dog rage in him, and he lunges after her and bites her. And honestly, that was a good part on Mr. Peabody, and you know what? She deserved that. And because he did that, it makes things worse. And she calls in the authorities, the police, to arrest Mr. Peabody. And yeah, for sure, because it seems like Mr. Peabody is going to lose custody of Sherman. And then what happens next is, because the two Shermans are not supposed to, touch hands, but they do so, and of course, this causes a paradox. And yeah, that's when all hell really breaks loose this time. Mr. Peabody telling Sherman to run, and that goes for Penny, because Penny tagging along with them. They get back in the way back time machine, while, Allison Jennings' character, the Petersons, and the police are on their tail, and of course they escape in the time machine, and when they escape, because, caused a little blast wave, and their faces, my face is stiff, said one of the police. Yeah, I think it was one of the police that said that, because their face is being stiffed because of that. And thus, Mr. Peabody and Sherman and Penny trying to figure out what to do. What happens next is, in the sky, a lot of things from the past start showing up. This rift, like a portal opening and everything from ancient Egypt, Greece, France, everything is showing up, and also from the French Revolution. And those who we saw, from Mary, Robespierre, again, if I'm saying the name right, Leonardo da Vinci, and Patrick Warburton's character, they're all there, and a couple of other historical figures who we did not see until now, like Albert Einstein. And Albert Einstein, because I mentioned Mel Brooks early on, Mel Brooks voicing Albert Einstein. And that was pretty fitting, and it's pretty funny because Albert Einstein is trying to solve a Rubik's Cube. And I think, he's successfully getting there. He managed to complete, most of the sides, I think except for one more. So he's got one more. We even see some of the presidents. Yeah, some of the presidents are there. And just all of them roaming around. And of course, King Tut obviously is there, and still going after Penny a little bit. And there's a little chase that happens, and Patrick Warburton's character, he comes face to face with Allison Jennings' character, and it's love at first sight for him because he falls in love with her. Oh boy, where's that? How's that gonna go on? Where's that gonna end up with? How's that gonna happen later on? Where's that end up? Anyways, and so they escape. They can't, get out of there. They can't time travel and such because, it's not working. And the madness comes to an end when the Wayback Time Machine crashes. And, by this point, the authorities and the police showing up, and Mr. Peabody is under arrest, and Allison Jennings' character, saying to Sherman, you know what happens when dogs bite, people and such. And Yeah, not a good sign. And Sherman just giving this speech and just, begging him to be let go and such. And, he says it that he's a dog, I'm a dog. And, he's standing up for his adoptive father. And not to mention, when Sherman thought Mr. Peabody was dead because of that giant wheeled horse, there was a moment where he did call Mr. Peabody Dad. And here's the thing. It turns out that Mr. Peabody was all right because Mr. Peabody, he had came back from Greece and he was all right. And the other Mr. Peabody and the other Sherman, they doubted that was possible, that, Mr. Peabody would be killed. And thus, yeah, he did not get killed. So, I mean, of course, Sherman didn't know that at first. I mean, yeah, how could you know? And so on. How should you would have known? Anyways. And everybody else standing up for Mr. Peabody as well. Marie, and those from Greece, Egypt, King Tut as well. Everybody standing up and saying, I'm a dog too, etc. And we even get a quick cameo of Spartacus. And Spartacus, I don't know, because who voiced Spartacus? I'm not seeing. Oh, no, here he is. Oh, Walt Dorn voiced Spartacus. And Walt Dorn, him being a DreamWorks employee, and, he's best known for being the head of story of some DreamWorks animated feature films, and he's most notably well known being the voice of Rumpelstiltskin. Yes, so he voices Spartacus, and it's obvious because you think that, well, Spartacus would say, I'm a dog too. No, he says, I'm Spartacus. It's so obvious. And not to mention, Spartacus was modeled after Kirk Douglas. Yep, the late legendary Kirk Douglas, which makes sense because, well, Kirk Douglas, he played Spartacus. Yeah, him being the one and only Spartacus. So it only makes sense that, Spartacus and Mr. Peabody and Sherman have the same face and, be modeled after Kirk Douglas. Very fitting, very fitting. Also, Walt Dorn, he did 2 more voices. He voiced a taxi driver and he voiced a French peasant, in the French Revolution. So everybody's standing up for Mr. Peabody, and up until a couple of the U.S. presidents show up. And one of them, of course, being, well, George Washington, since George Washington was mentioned, and thus we actually see him. And, oh, I didn't realize this, because all 3 presidents that appear at the end of Mr. Peabody and Sherman, in that sequence where everybody is standing up for Mr. Peabody, I'm a dog, Jess Harnell voices the 3 presidents. He voices George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and the 3rd president, Clinton. Yeah, I didn't expect Clinton to show up, but that was pretty cool. You know what? Because Jess Harnell, he did a pretty good impression of Bill Clinton. Like, this is my impression too. So, I'm a dog too. I mean, that's the best I can do, but I think I did pretty good. And you can let me know too. Also, Jess Harnell also voiced Isaac Newton, because we do get an appearance of Isaac Newton. He also voiced a New York City cop. Okay, because voicing those kind of characters, background characters, etc. So the presidents standing up for Mr. Peabody, and especially George Washington, making a change in the law and for Mr. Peabody, and thus Allison Janney's character is defeated. Mr. Peabody is released, and, everything's good now. All except for, well, the paradox, because the rift happening, and, well, it's up to Mr. Peabody and Sherman to do something about it. And Sherman, he has another idea. He has an idea how to fix this by going into the future. And Mr. Peabody likes the sound of it. And thus, that's what they do. They start up the Wayback Time Machine, and thus they make their destination into the future, because everything should seem all right in the future. And by doing so, well, what's going to happen now? Like, nothing's happening so far. I also like this that moment where Patrick Warburton's character has Penny, like, get up on his shoulder to get a better view at this on what Mr. Peabody and Sherman are doing. That was a nice moment right there, yeah. Well, what happens is, because when they disappear, well, everybody goes back to their rightful time. And it's unfortunate for Allison Jennings' character, Miss Grunion. Yeah, I got that. I did get that right. Because I got that right at first at some point, and now, once again, I got right. Miss Grunion, because Miss Grunion's still going on Mr. Peabody, because, well, everything's good now, but not for her, and her saying, mark my words, I'll get you, Mr. Peabody, but she is actually lifted up because Patrick Warburton's character takes Grunion with him, because, he's in love with Grunion, and thus, well, she's going to the time of Greece, so bye-bye, Grunion, nice knowing ya, and thus, yeah, everything is going back to their rightful time, and the portal, the rift is now closed, but where's Mr. Peabody and Sherman? It seems like that, well, are they okay? Even Penny is getting worried, even when, well, because she gets a hug and, is comforted by her mother. But sure enough, well, they're all right. They make it back, and everything is back to normal. Yep. And the epilogue, because, well, once again, Mr. Peabody taking Sherman to school, and everything's going pretty well now for Mr. Peabody and his adoptive son, Sherman. And, well, and that also goes for Penny and Sherman. And, well, because them going into school, and Mr. Peabody, he gives one more bit of narration to us audience, and thus he rides off on his motorcycle, and yeah, that was a nice way to end it. And I think, yeah, during the credits, or, before the credits start, well, we see an aftermath on what happened with, everybody in their time, from Greece, France, Italy, from, say, Leonardo da Vinci, Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, Isaac Newton. Things are looking pretty good for all of them, since, because they traveled into modern time, and what they're doing some things that, happen in modern time. Even Grunion, she gets married to, Patrick Warburton's character. She seems happy, and that's nice to see. It's probably, because she's by now changed her ways now that, she's married. And also because Leonardo da Vinci and Mona Lisa spray painting, and George Washington showing off the piece of money because with his face on it, and Isaac Newton showing up and getting the two girls' attention over that, him having his face on a dollar bill and such, and George Washington losing the attention. Poor George. Yeah, so yeah, it was a nice way to end that as well, because, aside from, with Mr. Peabody and Sherman and Penny, what happened with the historical figures, and also Albert Einstein, because it seemed like that he finally finished the Rubik's Cube, except one piece, I think, on the side of red, where there was a white piece, and Albert Einstein has just had it. He smashes it into pieces, breaks it. That was pretty funny. That's understandable, I should say, because you have those moments like, that's it. Yeah. So again, that was a nice and funny and good way to end the film right there. Mr. Peabody and Sherman. What a great DreamWorks animated feature film this is. I really enjoyed it. I didn't think it was that bad, and I'm pretty sure that, yeah, this did pretty well when it came out, and that's good to see. The story was good, the characters were good as well, the funny and emotional moments, the music by the one and only Danny Elfman, the action and all the time travel and stuff like that, and what Mr. Peabody and Sherman do, and with the historical figures. Yeah, just everything about this DreamWorks animated feature film was really good. And I'm giving Mr. Peabody and Sherman, yeah, it's on my mind. I'm giving it 8 out of 10 stars. Yes, 8 out of 10 stars for Mr. Peabody and Sherman. And what about you guys? What do you think of Mr. Peabody and Sherman itself? Did you enjoy this DreamWorks animated feature film? Have you seen Mr. Peabody and Sherman, the cartoon, and, by the late legendary Jay Ward? With that, Rocky and Bullwinkle, etc. Did you enjoy what DreamWorks brought to this movie adaptation of Mr. Peabody and Sherman? Did you get some good laughs? Did you cry at any of the emotional moments? Did you enjoy the characters? Everything about this film and all that I've had to say. And what did you think of my review? Leave comments and give this review video a like as always. And so, with all that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of Mr. Peabody and Sherman. More review videos are on the way. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward, and I'll see you guys in the next video/review. And happy anniversary to Mr. Peabody and Sherman. Take care and peace out.